Welcome to Honest Money. On today's episode, we speak to research scientist Sarisha Perumal, who wants to learn more about ethical investing. Warren Ingram speaks about ESG within the investing sector, index providers that offer ESG investments, the effects of war on energy independence and climate change, and how it will affect future investing opportunities. Stay tuned for more. Don't forget to subscribe and share if you're enjoying the show.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Honest Money. Today, I'm really chuffed to have one of our regular listeners on the show, Sarisha Perumal. Thanks so much for joining us, Sarisha.
Thank you, Warren. It's good to be here.
So just for our listeners who I'm sure won't know you, you're not a media personality, and from what we were discussing off air, you really focus on air quality. Tell us more.
I am an air quality scientist, so my focus is on all things air pollution, what we're breathing in the ambient atmosphere, and looking at the health impacts and where air pollution is affecting people the most, and what are the major sources of air pollution. Those are the kind of issues that I focus on, and helping governments and industries better manage their air pollution.
So I have to ask you very selfishly, I've got one of those kind of air purifiers that I put in my bedroom and that I sleep with here in Joburg, and it tells me it cuts out, everything but 0.01% of all particles in the air. Are those things kind of useful, or are they a waste of time?
I think if it has a HEPA filter, then it can actually be quite useful.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Sarisha, today's topic is really something close to your heart, and so I thought it would be great if you could share your question, and then let's discuss it.
Sure, Warren. So as an air quality scientist, I'm acutely aware of the risks that air pollution poses to human health. It's one of the leading causes of death in the world. I mean, more people die from air pollution exposure than from malaria, TB, AIDS, and even COVID. So it's a huge number. And it's something that doesn't get a lot of focus as well. I mean, most people know about climate change, but you don't stop to think about what you're breathing in every day. So while the two are very linked as well, I won't go into the details, but the sources of air pollution and the sources of climate change are very similar. The sources of greenhouse gases are very similar, or if not the same in some instances. So most of the sources of air pollution are from burning fossil fuels. So, the cars, buses, trucks, and then we have industries, and sometimes like wood burning and biomass burning. But yeah, the majority of it is from motor vehicles and industries. And we all know about like Eskom, the power stations that are associated with air pollution. I shouldn't probably say Eskom. Well,
it's the truth. It is, yeah. Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, so we know about some of the hotspots in South Africa, but in the major cities, we also have sources of air pollution, like motor vehicles and even residential burning from informal settlements where people don't have access to cleaner forms of energy. So my issue, or my problem is I want to invest my money in companies or organizations that don't contribute to air pollution and climate change. Because I've noticed that in the past, when I've done investments, like some of the companies are not necessarily aligned with my values, in terms, especially my environmental values. Like they might be extractive industries, like mining companies, or they might be, power producers as well, that are currently, contributing to air pollution and climate change and impacting on people's health. And I wouldn't feel good about that going forward, continuing to do that. For example, I don't even know what for my pension and my retirement community, I don't know what companies I'm invested in. And recently, wanting to make another investment. I've got like some savings, and I'd like to make an investment that's ethically sound, so in line with my environmental values, and also, if possible, companies that pay people fair wages and have a good social impact as well.
Okay. Thank you. So I think it's, it's such a relevant topic for many of us as investors, because, we want our money to work towards our financial futures. And at the same time, we want to have a future to be able to live. We want to be able to live in a cleaner world, and for people who have children, they want to be able to provide a future for their kids as well in every respect. So I think it is very much a hot topic at the moment, and certainly if I look at the flow of money, which is really where it counts, over the last 4 or 5 years, the flow of money into this broad category, and just I hate jargon, but let's just talk about it for a second. The broad category of these kinds of investments is called ESG. So ESG, it's about the environment, it's about social issues, and it's about governance issues, and they're very broad. So when we talk about environment, it's not specific to air pollution or just recycling or just renewable energy. It's the entirety of anything that impacts the environment. And then social equally is a huge category, because it's about, as you say, one of the things will be about paying fair wages, paying living wages to people and suppliers, and then the whole issues around inequality, both between low-income workers and high-income workers in the same business, but also then across the gender gaps, etc. So social is a really big thing, and also how companies check their supply chains. For example, a manufacturer that makes clothes, but uses a factory in an area that uses slave labor or child labor. That's all part of the social issue. And then lastly, governance is. I think as South Africans, we understand the impact of bad governance very well. We know how it can hurt us and affect us as a country. And more recently, we're recording this podcast in the middle of the Ukrainian invasion by Russia, and suddenly, some of the so-called ethical investors are caught short, because do they still allocate money to Russian businesses? Forget about sanctions. How do they align investing in a country like Russia when Russia is invading another country, a sovereign state? So governance becomes a really key issue as well. And so I think, a little bit of kind of a background, Sarisha, to this topic for me is I'm so scared that we kind of follow the cancel culture when we invest money, because I'll use a hypothetical example. Let's not name and shame businesses just yet, but I think let's just say in our country, one of the 2 biggest polluters in South Africa is a listed business, and it's no matter what they say or what anybody says, we know for a fact they're causing major air pollution in the country. Now the question there is, if they decide to allocate, let's say, 30-40% of their revenue every year to cleaning up their business and to reducing their carbon footprint, reducing their reliance on fossil fuels, putting proper filtration systems on the parts of their businesses that still burn fossil fuels, etc. If they start to make that kind of a proper concerted move that can be checked, should we withhold our money from them? In other words, should we tell our pension funds and our exchange traded funds and our unit trusts not to allocate money to a business like that? In which case it doesn't have capital to make those big changes. Or do we encourage that business to make the change and to become a contributor to moving the world of climate change in the right direction? So I think this, this issue is very, very complicated, very nuanced, because my concern here is, you can get through sort of an ESG, let's say, tick the box approach, where a company says, I won't score well on environment, but I'll make sure I do lots of kind of window dressing to sort out social and governance issues and continue to be a huge polluter without really making any big change there. But I'll rank really well on an overall ESG score because my social and governance looks good. And that's the part that I'm cautious of here. Is my view is, as investors, just philosophically, we can't tell people how to invest their money. I can give my view, and hopefully, we all decide what's best for ourselves. But my view is that this is an emerging field of study, both in the world, but also with specifically with investments. And there are lots of companies that are out there promoting themselves as ESG analysts, and companies that are saying they'll give ratings and really understand what businesses are ranking well on ESG and what aren't. The problem is that, if you're sending corporate business a tick box approach and the corporate is huge, they'll employ lots of kind of quasi-compliance people who will know how to work a questionnaire and know how to manipulate the questionnaire so that they rank well without actually doing much work. And I think that is happening across the board. I'm not saying South Africa is specific yet. It's a global issue. And then there are other businesses that are much more nuanced in their approach, especially investment houses that are saying, you know what, we're not going to be exclusionary as a starting principle. We're going to go in, if we are big investors in big polluters, we're going to go in and change the board, put our representatives on the boards of those businesses and then force change within the company. And be realistic that we can't stop pollution from one year to the next, but if we can force real material change year after year after year on an accelerated basis, then we think that's the right way to go. And for me as an investor, it's a very difficult issue because it's something that health-wise I know we're being impacted every single day, but at the same time I just feel we need to be careful about how we do this. So if you said to me, I'm looking for investments that align with my values, I would say in South Africa, really hard to do. It's, in all honesty, if you're looking at our top 100 companies on the JSE and you're trying to decide where to put your money, I think the number of businesses that actually would have a very low environmental footprint and I think are small. And inevitably at the moment, if you look at the world of ESG investments, about 30% of the businesses that form part of the ESG universe are pure tech companies because, they're able to, relatively quickly put up solar plants, to subsidize the power consumption that they have. To do things to improve battery storage, etc. But they produce nothing, and they don't create goods. So it's relatively easy for them to have a small environmental footprint. But the problem then, if you're an investor, is you end up with a third of, or 30% to a third of your investments being in just in one sector, just in tech, and then another about 20% just in the healthcare sector. So 50% of what you own, if you were a purist ESG investor right now, 50% is allocated to two sectors. And something like energy only makes up 4% of an ESG investment universe at the moment. So investing, for example, purely in renewables, whether it be solar or wind or whatever else we can find out there, you're not allocating a lot of money to renewables as a start, and then as using my example, you're avoiding the historical big bad polluters of the world who actually have huge amounts of income and huge balance sheets that might be at the moment being driven towards a cleaner future. And so it's tricky there. And I feel in South Africa, I can't find an ESG sort of a ranking that I trust, where I would say to myself, gee, I can allocate money here and I know I'm in a pure ESG investment. I feel at the moment, if you want to make an impact with your money, it's almost better with South African investments to say, I'm relying on pension fund consultants. I'm relying on the Coronations and the Alan Greys and the Ned Groups and the 91s of the world to start driving that change because they are the big shareholders along with the PIC of these big businesses. But what I will do is I'll take a portion of my own money every year and I'll allocate it to one specific NGO or one specific business, and rather do impact investing in a company that I believe in. In other words, it might not be listed, and it might not even be for profit. I might be doing it just to allocate to an NGO that I know is driving research in the right direction, or is driving behavior change. So for me, that's probably for my own money, that's the most practical way I can find with South African investments to make a change that aligns with my values, but not fooling myself that there is a big chunk of my indexed retirement money that is being allocated to polluters at the moment. I know that's a mouthful, but I think for SA specifically, if we have to divide it up into the world, I think South African investments. I think it's. I know the fund managers. I speak to them a lot. I can see that they're starting to take climate change more seriously. They are certainly looking at the whole broader ESG theme and saying that they are going to be agents of change. But globally, to give you a bit more clarity there are, just one company, just one index provider called iShares, which is the biggest index provider in the world. They have 33 different kinds of ESG exchange traded funds that you can buy. And it can be like really broad. So you can just say, I'm going to buy the world stock market of ESG investments. So those are companies across the globe that rank well on an ESG scorecard. Or you can be really specific to say, I'm only going to invest in an exchange traded fund of companies that only do renewable energy. You can be you can do a new energy one, you can do a water one, for example. You can do food security, and all of them are subsectors of the broader ESG theme. So if you want to be very specific, I think, and be very clear that your money is being invested 100% according to your values, I think globally you've got many more options than you've got in South Africa.
Thanks, Warren. That's definitely put things into perspective. I actually didn't think about the nuances of how you would decide whether something is environmentally sound or ethically sound.
And I mean, I think about the motor manufacturers, especially the European ones, but actually it's a global issue. They a lot of them have committed to stopping production of internal combustion engines, so fossil fuel burning engines, by somewhere between 2029 to kind of 2035. So that means that they will still be making those cars between now and then, but they're allocating huge amounts of money to electric cars now and potentially hydrogen cars, etc. So I think that to say, for example, I'm not going to invest any money with Mercedes because they're still selling internal combustion engines today. I'm not sure that you're achieving an outcome that you want. And then the other thing that's very unclear for me is, how expensive, and I'm talking about from an environmental footprint point of view, how expensive electric car is, because the batteries are built using minerals that are mined, and some of those mining operations are far from environmentally friendly. And these cars are not all necessarily made in one place. So the battery might be made in one country and then shipped on an expensive fossil fuel burning ship to another place, and then they get put together using coal burnt energy. So I think that this is a really complex field. And especially for someone who wants to be really precise about what they do. If you're a scientist and you want to know, I want to be absolutely clinical on where I allocate my money, I think this is a really seriously complicated issue.
You're right. I have been trying to be precise about the whole process, but I understand that it's not necessarily possible, especially investing in South African funds.
And I think also just be aware that there are some of the big fund managers in South Africa that are becoming agents for change. And especially as with respect to the older people that in the industry, the younger fund managers coming through are taking this, the whole environmental and climate change movement much more seriously. For them, it's almost a deal breaker that they won't work for a business that isn't taking the climate change issue seriously. So I think that it's a change that's rapidly evolving. If there is one you can't say that there are any positives to war. There isn't. A war is a terrible thing. But if there's one side effect from this war, might well be the drive for Europe specifically to accelerate to energy independence. And I think part of that will be the move to make themselves completely independent of fossil fuels in any description. And so I think that a lot more money will be spent in Europe in the next 5 or 10 years, much more than they were originally planning to do for energy security. So for them, it becomes an environmental issue, but actually a matter of national security. And one thing we know about a wealthy country, or any country, in fact, is that the moment they feel insecure, they start spending more on security, and then they have much bigger budgets for security than they do for pure climate change as a standalone issue. So, the two big kind of themes of security and climate change are going to overlap for quite some time. So I feel a little bit hopeful there, although it's an awful reason for that to happen. But that's something that is moving forward. And I think for you, watch the space in South Africa. I think there will be more businesses that will open up, that will form part of the stock exchange. And as I say, hopefully some of those enormous polluters in South Africa will be incentivized either through taxes or through credits, carbon credits and the like, for actually changing the way they do business, because we have to make it count financially. The only way you force a CEO of a big business to make a big change is don't rely on their goodwill, make it affect their back pockets, and watch how quickly they'll find reasons to make change, not reasons to stop change.
Definitely. I think sometimes you need a top-down approach when it comes to policy change, and creating real change on the ground is a different story. But I have another question. How do you anticipate the impacts of climate change on our investments?
Part of it is going to be things that we simply can't foresee. So, for example, if you look at the insurance industry around in South Africa, but around the world, climate change is already causing the insurance industry real nightmares, because the number of claims for kind of big storms or big floods or big weather events is increasing, because the number of really unusual weather events is rising all the time. So we see it everywhere, whether it be more tornadoes in one part of the world or more floods in another part, more fires. Frankly, if you look at the States and Australia, kind of bushfires that are raging across the country and destroying huge swathes of forests, etc. Those kinds of weather events are going to continue, I think, and that poses big risks for insurance businesses, and so that means that the cost of insurance rises, and so simply for every business out there that might have any kind of impact on any weather event, for them the cost of doing business is going to rise. And then if we see rising temperatures causing flooding or causing sea levels to rise, that's going to have a big impact on coastal cities, especially coastal cities that rely on. I'm just thinking of the whole of the Netherlands. It's at huge risk. The Netherlands is a major distribution hub for goods around the world, and so logistics and supply chains are going to change dramatically. So I think that there are obvious risks, where you could say, well, what about food businesses, food security? Because if weather becomes more wild, droughts become worse. Snowfalls become worse on the other side of it, and everything in between. Making sure that we can provide enough food to the world at a reasonable cost for everybody is going to become a major issue as well. And so I think climate change for me is a massive variable, and the volatility is only going to increase. So from an investment point of view, I see we're going to be in a position where we're going to just see risks that absolutely surprise us. You're going to look at it and say, I had no idea that my laptop, price would go up by 30%, and it was all to do with climate change. But eventually, those kinds of things might be happening. And so I think that variable risks will be rising all the time. And then I think on the other side of it is that there will be more there will be some surprising opportunities. So for example, we're going to look at older businesses. Everyone's really focused on Tesla and how Tesla were the big agents for change in electric driving, and I think that's true. They were agents for change, but I firmly believe that some of the older motor manufacturers have a long history in innovation, and I would be very surprised if a company like Toyota doesn't come out in the next decade with multiple forms of renewable energy to drive cars, and it won't just be electric batteries. It might well be hydrogen fuel cells, etc. And so I think the rate of innovation will accelerate as more people realize climate change is such a big risk. And it's an interesting thing about human beings. We're kind of lazy as a group. We don't really put real effort into something until we're all terrified. And then once we're all terrified, innovation takes off. And I feel that's going to be what happens. The question maybe that you would be better positioned to answer than me is, do we innovate by the time it's too late? I hope not. But certainly that, I feel that the rate of change is accelerating all the time. It's not lip service anymore. A decade ago, a lot of companies were paying lip service to this issue, but a decade later, those 25-year-olds that were employed in their first or second jobs in those same businesses are now 35 or 40 years old, and they're often the leaders of the companies in maybe not right at the top, but they're leaders in their businesses, and their values are 100% aligned with stopping climate change as much as possible.
Definitely. I think, I'm 36, so I think most people my age are worried about what the future will bring. And a lot of people have kids who are little and they're wondering what kind of future their kids are going to grow up in. So they're trying to do everything they can to ensure that it's not affected by climate change. I was just reading the Just Transition Framework, which was released by the Presidential Climate Commission recently. And it mentions that, if we don't pivot, if we don't adapt to the needs of the changing climate, then South Africa is going to get left behind, and a lot of people are going to be put into precarious positions in terms of livelihoods. So my question then is, they talk specifically about the Mpumalanga region and the Eastern Cape with the automotive industry. So I think my question is, how do you see the investment landscape changing as these regions that have previously been the backbone of the economy, like the coal region and the automotive region, how do you say it?
Automotive industry.
Yes, automotive industry. Maybe they're suggesting in this Just Transition Framework that the automotive industry needs to shift into the manufacture of electric vehicles and charging stations, and in the coal industry to shift to renewables and sort of create jobs for people in those livelihoods. So do you think that that will change the investment landscape? And do you foresee South African companies getting involved, or do you think that it's going to be more of an external input from international companies?
I think it's going to be a kind of multi-pronged approach, because I feel it's wrong to think that South African businesses aren't innovative. One thing I admire about South African business people in South Africa and then watching them operate around the world is we're hugely innovative. We love to make a plan and adapt to the environment that we're in. Whatever the environment, whether it's political, geographic, economic, etc., we tend to find ways to get ourselves out of problems and often to lead change. And so I'm very sure that in our country, that sort of just transition let me not say it will, it can happen very quickly and very productively for people who are currently employed in the old world polluting industries, but also people who are unemployed. The biggest problems there, I think, are simply regulators, so both the actual regulations themselves and then the people in charge of the regulators. So the people in charge of the energy regulations in South Africa, and then also we've got very old cabinet ministers who I think their thinking on this is 2 or 3 decades old, and they're not forward thinking, and that's a huge frustration for me. If you listen to interviews from the motor manufacturers who have plants in South Africa, that they have been begging governments to adjust the policies in South Africa for a long time. To say if we want to continue making cars in South Africa and exporting them, we need to be able to manufacture electric cars in South Africa and sell them in South Africa on a competitive price. Right now, as it stands today, our beloved government, actually penalize electric cars in South Africa with excess taxes. So we actually charge higher prices for electric cars than we do for fossil fuel burning cars, and it's simply because of archaic legislation, and then we get into the talk shop mode, where trade and industry will talk about changing things and talk about the changes. If they stopped talking and just made the changes and actually, I know we've got limited budgets in our country, so maybe we can't give every consumer a credit for buying an electric car. I understand that we might not have the capacity to do that, but surely we don't need to tax electric cars more. We should be taxing them at zero or less. So I think that the innovation by the population, by the actual normal, ordinary South African is there, and the desire to kind of move ourselves forward is there, and then we've got all the resources in the world to make that happen. I mean, anybody that spent any time on our coasts, whether it's it's not fair to call PE the only windy city in South Africa, but look at the West Coast and the coastline of South Africa. The ability to generate very consistent wind power is there, and it's not difficult to do. And then we've got a very dry country with large parts of the country having massive number of days of sunshine. So to be able to provide wind and solar in a fairly consistent, reliable way, into a national grid is there. I think it's not difficult to do, but I feel like we have an energy minister who's pandering to the coal, to the coal industry, and more specifically to the unions in the coal industry. And so there's less will, or not enough will require inside to force the change. But if you listen to interviews by the CEO of Eskom, he's got some really pretty basic stuff that he would love to do. To take an old coal-fired power plant in Mpumalanga and put that into a joint venture investment with a renewable energy business, where they put solar and wind turbines in that old land, and use the existing distribution grids that are there already. All the grids built, all the infrastructure is there, the transformers are there. So for Eskom to offer that as a kind of a capital incentive to a joint venture, and then allow private capital to build those plants very quickly and efficiently is there. What he needs as the CEO of Eskom is the Minister of Energy, and I guess the state-owned enterprises to be enablers, and to get out of the way and to stop causing hurdles. And so I feel we've got an old-fashioned ideology that gets in the way. But if you talk about natural resources in our country for renewable energy, we are deeply blessed, and so it's not difficult to do. And I feel we've got the right mindset as a country to do this. We're not a bunch of Texans living in the US who want to drive big trucks and burn fossil fuels as a constitutional right. We all feel this pressure. We all want to live in a clean country, and I think you talk to the average South African, and they don't want to breathe lousy air. They want to breathe clean air. They want to get cheap energy. I mean, I keep thinking, I can't wait for the day when my solar system in my house can charge my car, and I can stop burning fossil fuels and stop paying anybody to generate energy for my car. I can do it myself. I'll put more money into doing that than necessary. So I think we need visionary leaders from the top down, and even municipalities. If you look at some of the proposals from municipalities, they're saying, I'm just using thumbsuck numbers, but they're going to charge me R2 a kilowatt hour for using electricity from them, but they'll only pay me R1 a kilowatt hour if I give them electricity from my solar system. I mean, surely it should be the other way around. They should be saying to me, it's 2 rand a kilowatt hour, but we'll pay you 3 if you give us electricity. If you become a net producer from a renewable source. So it's very simple stuff that needs to happen, but it requires political will and not from dinosaurs, but from the next generation. So I can't wait for a younger generation of leaders to take over the country.
I agree with you there. I think there needs to be a mindset shift, and there's lots of funding opportunities from the international community if we come to the party when it comes to renewables.
Yeah, and this whole attitude that we mustn't allow the West or the developed world to dictate to us with their money. Well, my view is if they're willing to give us very cheap financing or concessionary financing, in other words, money that costs nothing to take, and their only request of us is it must go to renewable energy. My view is that's dictating good behavior. It's dictating something we actually all want. So the fact that someone's dictating with their own checkbook is fine. That shouldn't be a rejection on a matter of principle.
I think it's the good kind of peer pressure that's happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. I feel our president understands. I think he's got the right sense of this, but I'm not convinced that everyone around him has the same view. And so that change of leadership at the top needs to happen around him, and hopefully he drives that.
Yeah, I think if you just pick up the draft climate change bill or the just transition framework, you can't not see that things have to change.
Absolutely. And then I think maybe I see we're running out of time, but maybe to summarize for people listening to this and saying, so what do I do now? My 2 kind of broadest hints that I can give you are, in South Africa, have a look at what, if your money is being managed by a big fund manager, have a look at what they're writing about on their websites and in their material, because you'll see whether they're taking the whole ESG theme seriously, and also more specifically around the environment. Are they actually very active in terms of pushing the companies that they invest in to change? And then if you want to allocate money, my view is find an NGO. It might not be too many listed companies in South Africa just yet that you can allocate money to, but find an NGO that is making an impact. And remember, you don't need to change the world with your money. You can change one small thing. And if we all allocate money to one small NGO that is making a real change on the ground, lots of small changes become a massive tidal wave of change over time. So I think in South Africa, that's my comment for ESG in here. But watch the space, the change is happening. And then globally, as I said, I think there are some very good exchange traded funds out there. And if you just Google, ESG exchange traded funds or ESG ETFs, you'll find a massive range that are out there. And as I said, you can be really specific as to what cause or what part of the whole ESG theme you want. Otherwise, if you're not too specific and it's something you feel strongly about across environment, social and governance issues, then just choose a world ESG index as an example, and know that your money is going to reasonably the right causes. It might not be perfect in every way. Nothing is perfect. So I think those would be my 2 main hints.
Thank you, Warren. You've given me a lot to think about. I think I have a way forward now with my plans for my investments.
Thanks so much for being brave enough to join us. I know it's intimidating being on the air, and I thought you were great, and I hope that you find some investments that suit your values.
Thank you very much. I think I will now. You've given me a lot of interesting information, and I think I never thought about the impact investing. That's something I didn't come across in my reading, so I want to do a bit more research on that. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Honest Money. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is @WarrenIngram. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Chat soon.